Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Can everybody hear me okay? Yes. So first of all, I want to thank you all for being here at the first Workforce Development Summit. POIC is sponsoring. My name is Joe McFerrin. Good news about the first summit is we're amongst friends. President and CEO of POIC in Rosemary High School. You guys know we do 4 things and we try to do them best. We feel we are the best: education, workforce development, violence prevention, and health and wellness. I'd like to thank our panelists here. You're going to hear more from them. We're happy to have esteemed guests here with lots of knowledge on how to help people help themselves. I want to thank Nick Crawford. Nick, can you wave your hand? Nick Crawford. Let's give him a hand. He's in the MUS Elemental. POIC has had a partnership with Elemental since 2014. We were the beneficiaries of the first 4K for Charity run, and AWS is a strategic partner, and they're also what we call limited partner. We serve as a general partner in the work that we do. So thank you again, Nick. We couldn't do it in this kind of work without you. Why a Workforce Development Summit? So we believe that all people have value, all people can grow, and that all people can contribute and build a thriving and safe community. We want to make sure that all people have an opportunity to build a fulfilling career and take care of their families. And with this kind of work, these kind of discussions, and these relationships that we build between job seekers, workforce development professionals, policymakers, and corporations is how we're going to get that done. Especially for the people who we consider forgotten human capital. Yet these people have value and have a lot to contribute. With that, I would like to introduce our moderator for today's discussion. And as you sit there, think about questions that you may have for this panel. Our moderator is Sherry Dunn. She is the Vice President of the Oregon Workforce and Talent Development Board and the CEO Principal of ITBOX, a consulting firm specializing in institutional and organizational consulting, change management, system equity and inclusion, and workforce development. She is also the author of the upcoming book, Qualified: Why Race Still Matters in the Workplace. I consider Sherry a friend, a highly effective leader, and a champion for helping people help themselves. So let's give Sherry a round of applause.
Thank you, Jim. There you go. It's not that big of a room. It's not like you really can't hear me. So first of all, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I appreciate being here. The mission of what you do is so important. And Joe asked me to get you ready and relaxed and engaged for this panel. So one thing I want to say is get relaxed. It's not stiff. We want you to engage with the information. Think about the questions you might have. There are no bad questions. There are no stupid questions. There's only, the only thing is like not asking the question, like if you have one. So do think about that. And I wanted to say that, today bringing together local employers, job seekers, workforce development practitioners, policymakers, all of this is so important for our region. And our discussion today is incredibly timely. In 2020, the Heinrich Report had a finding on racial disparities in high school, career, and technical education, CTE. Notably, that report found that Black and Latino students are less likely to be enrolled in STEM classes and or workshops or even programs compared to their white peers. An analysis for 40 states indicates that Black and Latino students are more frequently enrolled in courses like hospitality and human services, whereas white students are more prevalent in STEM and IT. So this is really important, right, to try to change that. Factors contributing to these disparities include students of color being guided towards certain courses by counselors, teachers, or unavailability of STEM and IT courses in their schools, right? And we need to address this because, as Liza will talk about, the workforce needs this. And there are significant disparities, right? Although Black workers make up 13% of the workforce, their representation in the trades is lower, right? And they tend to be concentrated in fields like postal service, security, which often don't have as high a wages. Hispanic workers, a lot of us think of Hispanic workers in the trades, right? People say, oh, they're represented. But when you dig into the data, you know what the data tells us? They are in lower wage, higher risk, more dangerous professions in the trade without that opportunity for advancement in the trade. So there's still something there. So at this critical juncture, POIC, Rosemary Anderson, is a pivotal part of changing this, right? Of changing this scenario for young people. And as Liza's going to illustrate, our workforce in Oregon and around the country, it's evolving. It's evolving, influenced by various factors, some within our control and others unexpected over even just the last decade. The Center for American Progress suggested that closing this racial income gap could substantially boost the U.S. economy, potentially increasing the economy by $2 trillion, right? So this is family wealth, what do you call it, historical, generational wealth, that kind of thing. So we have this great distinguished panel that's going to dig into this. So let me introduce our panel. Of course, we have Joe Farron, who you met. Yeah. And then yeah. And then we have Yusuf Okbazji. Yusuf is a dedicated engineer and alumnus of Portland State University and Portland Community College, specializing in the semiconductor industry. As a systems owner of ASML, he focuses on high numerical aperture machines and Shades of Netherlands Employees Resource Group. Okay, we got to understand what that's about. His global contributions span across South Korea, Taiwan, the U.S., and he recently organized the Silicon Forest Tech Summit in the greater Portland area to promote diverse, vibrant tech community. Next, we have Andrew McGough from Work Systems. He's the executive director of Work Systems, Workforce Development, the Workforce Development Board for Multnomah County and Washington counties. Before assuming his current role in 2006, Andrew served as the organization's Director of Technical Assistance and Chief Operating Officer. Prior to joining Work Systems, he was the Executive Vice President of Finance for the National Association of Workforce Boards in Washington, D.C. And last but not least is Liza Moorhead, she's a data and research analyst at Work Systems. Liza is responsible for institutional research and data reporting, as well as the labor market, demographic, economic, policy research. She holds a PhD in urban studies with emphasis on public policy and urban planning. And this is an amazing group, so let's give them all a hand. And Liza, I'm going to turn it over to Liza to start us off with a regional economic snapshot of new challenges and expanding opportunities.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here today. A big part of my job at Work Systems is to have a broad understanding of what's happening in our regional economy and how that impacts our work with the labor force. And so today I'm going to share with you some of the things that we've seen in the last year or so that are really impacting the regional economy, the workers who are available, and the opportunities available to them. The first thing I'm going to talk about is population. Today we are seeing things happening in our regional population that we didn't expect. So for the first time in memory, our regional population is shrinking. There are approximately 30,000 fewer people in Portland and Multnomah counties than there were just a few years ago. And Some of that can be explained by suburbanization. People are leaving Multnomah County, moving to Clark County, moving to other outlying counties. But that doesn't explain all of it, because the entire 7-county MSA has 10,000 fewer people today than it did just a few years ago. This is a map. It's a couple years old. It's the most recent data we have, and it shows net domestic migration by county. And the orange dots are negative domestic migration, and the blue are positive. So you can see that we aren't alone as a region losing population. We see it around Seattle. We see it around San Francisco and the urban centers in Southern California. In the years since the pandemic, we've seen large migration to the Mountain West, to the Southwest, and to the Southeast. People are rediscovering or discovering for the first time smaller cities, and the cachet that we had as a region is starting to fall. The other thing that's happening is the birth rate. Starting in the early 1990s, the birth rate across the country started to fall. And so fewer babies being born in the 1990s means fewer young adults today. This population pyramid shows the population by 5-year increments, and you can see right about 25 years old, there is a 5% decrease in the population of people 25 to 29 than of people in their early 20s, and that stays pretty consistent. There are just fewer people in these next generations after the large millennial generation. The other thing that we're seeing is a change in domestic migration in and out of Oregon. So for years now, Oregon has had a very high population of adults 25 years or older with a bachelor's degree or higher. And that's something that's really helped us to attract a diversity of companies and to have a stronger regional economy. And that's not because we're so great as a state at educating our children and our young adults to have bachelor's degrees. It's because for a few decades, at least, we've been really good at attracting people with that educational level to come and make a home and raise their own families. But what we're seeing is that we're not as good at that as we used to be. So we're seeing a much sharper increase in the out-migration of people with bachelor's degrees or higher. And so we have more people like that leaving the state, fewer people coming in. And that's going to make it harder for certain segments of our economy to continue to grow. And that's not a big mystery, right? We all live here. We know how expensive housing is. We know how limited housing is. There are a lot of opportunities for people with young families, people planning families, to be able to buy homes and establish themselves in other areas of the Mountain West and the Southwest and the inner Southeast. So looking at who's leaving, we are seeing college graduates leaving Oregon at a faster rate than people without college educations. The next thing I want to talk about is employment. How are these demographic shifts showing up in our labor market? Despite the stagnation and decline of the population, employment continues to rise. We have more jobs in the Portland MSA today than we have had at any point in history. Our unemployment rate is at 4%, slightly lower than the Oregon unemployment rate of 4.2%. So that means that most people in our region who want a job are able to get a job. It doesn't mean that the jobs they're able to get pay enough to support a family. So looking at 7 out of the 10 largest occupations in our region by number of employees don't pay enough to support a family. At Work Systems, we use the self-sufficiency standard, which takes families, looks at them by number and age of people in the family, and identifies how much it costs to support that family without public support or private support. And what we see is that 7 of these top 10 largest occupations don't pay enough to support these family types. Even families with 2 full-time wage earners aren't necessarily earning enough to support themselves and their children. Last thing I want to mention here is Opportunity Youth. Opportunity Youth are young adults 16 to 24 who aren't in school and aren't working. And they are a huge untapped resource. Every couple of years, we publish the Opportunity Youth Report, where we really dig into this population and try to understand who these folks are. The last time we released this report 2 years ago, found nearly 35,000 young adults who aren't in school and aren't working. That is a personal tragedy for those young adults, for their families, their communities, and for our entire region, because they represent labor and creativity and all these untapped resources that aren't going into making our economy a better place. We are currently working on a new version of this report that'll come out in the fall, and hopefully we'll see a smaller number, but that remains to be seen. So that was very negative, but now I'm going to talk about opportunity, because what we are seeing right now is some huge opportunities that are starting to come down the line for our population. So what we're witnessing right now in our region is large investments that are starting, that we're expecting over the next 10 years in infrastructure and semiconductors. So we are anticipating huge public investments for projects like the new interstate bridge. There are more than 100 large public construction projects in the next 5 years that are valued at $15 million or more. And those are just the large public projects. Those jobs are going to require a large number of workers, of highly skilled workers. And we're also seeing big investments both at the federal level, at the state level, and at the company level in semiconductors. Our region has a huge advantage when it comes to the semiconductor industry, and we're expecting to see this industry grow. And what that means is that between semiconductors, clean energy, and construction, we are anticipating a large growth in jobs that are available to people without a college degree. We're looking at jobs that are accessible to people after they've completed an apprenticeship, jobs that are accessible to people with an associate's degree or a credential from a community college. And these are all jobs we're really excited about. They pay good wages. They are place-based. You can't have someone in another country or another state build your bridge. These are opportunities, and we know the investments are coming. We know the jobs are coming. So right now is the right time to invest in expanding apprenticeship opportunities, expanding pre-apprenticeship programs, expanding training for these are the top 6 occupations in those fields. So at Work Systems, that's what we're gearing up to do, and we're excited about the opportunities to partner with many partners across the community to get local workers into these occupations.
So that was just such good information. And what really struck me is the perfect intersection of the work you all do here, Joe, that intersection of opportunity youth, of young people, and the coming amounts of money and work, right? How do we connect that? So I'm going to start with a question for each panelist. And I'll start with Andrew, since you are kind of down there. From your unique perspective, given what you've learned from Liza in your efforts to build up a skilled and robust workforce pipeline, what are you doing? What are you thinking about? What is what she said? How's that resonating with you?
Thanks for having me today, and it's really great to talk to folks. And I mentioned earlier, like, I prepared for the wrong question, but I will try and respond to Sherry's question maybe in a more circuitous way than I might normally. But
This is your first question. You don't have to say.
oh, good. Well, first of all, what really struck me and has really, frankly, is a big deal is this decline in population. It's been more than 30 years since our region has experienced a decline in population, and that impacts everything from the supply of workers, to the general health of the economy, to our capacity to provide public services moving forward. I mean, look, one thing that Liza didn't mention is a lot of those people who are leaving are high wage earners because they have the most flexibility to move. And in a state like Oregon, who's so reliant on income taxes to drive public services, that is a big deal and a massive problem. We have to figure it out. So I think what that says to me and what this all says to me is we cannot afford to leave anybody behind. We have to do a better job of reaching all Oregonians and providing them with access to these opportunities, because there are a lot of opportunities for very good, high-quality jobs now and in the foreseeable future. And so we really, I think, are at this inflection point of figuring out how do we do that and how do we do that together. So at Work Systems, as Liza mentioned, we have a couple strategies that we're going to rely on to help set the foundation for how we are going to help hopefully facilitate the transition to this new normal. And that, by the way, I think these population declines, it's not just a blip. This is the new normal. This is what it's going to look like forever because of demographics, because of that pyramid. This is not going to change anytime soon. So we do focus on industries that we know are going to offer high-quality jobs and pathways to livable wages. So construction, we know, advanced manufacturing with a focus on semiconductors currently, healthcare. And in healthcare, we're starting with sort of a higher level of focus on mental and behavioral health, because that's a massive challenge for our community, and also childcare. So we lump that into sort of like the personal care component of healthcare. We think that that's a really high demand and high opportunity area. And then Liza mentioned clean tech. We have the Portland Clean Energy Fund here in the city of Portland. That's a tremendous opportunity to work together to position the region and our workers to be successful in that new economy, because it's coming. It's like population. Sorry, climate change is real, and we need to get ready. So we're doing that. And what that means is we put investments there, we focus there. I'll be quick. And the other thing, we want to build a better system. The public invests a lot of resources into workforce development, but they're not well coordinated, they're not well aligned, they're difficult to navigate, they're often not very accessible, and we need to do a better job of that. And our primary strategy, and I will be quiet now, is to work with community, like POIC, like other organizations in our community, who bring the expertise of working with populations we want to serve to the table. And we want them to do their thing, but we want them to connect up to this bigger system, because that's, again, the only way we're going to make sure that all of the resources are targeted to the people who need them the most.
Thanks. You said it. Yeah, sure. From your unique perspective, given what we learned from Liza in your efforts to build and skill up a robust pipeline, what are you doing? What are you thinking about? What does her presentation make you think about?
Yeah. By the way, thank you for having me, and super excited to speak with you all and share a little bit about myself. So I actually moved here from South Dakota. So I'm sure if you saw that map, and we talk about diversity and everything like that, a lot of people are leaving South Dakota. Why would you want to leave South Dakota? Well, why would you want to stay in South Dakota? That's kind of the narrative, actually. A lot of people will say that. But then I can bring that conversation to Portland. So why stay in Portland? I moved to Portland because of tech opportunity. So I graduated with a degree, like I said, from Portland, like it was mentioned, from Portland State University, PCC. There weren't many tech jobs in the Midwest, but I did see in the West Coast that there were a ton. When I came here, it was super inspiring to see people from Nike, Intel, we're at Amazon, the Amazon Daimler. Is this mic okay? Can you guys hear me okay? I feel like it's going in and out. Okay. So I feel like the narrative a little bit is that I think, and again, I work for a company called ASML. How many of you all know what ASML is? Well, first of all, okay, you do. Thank you. First of all, it's an acronym. So some of those opportunities in the companies that are here, people don't necessarily see themselves in them. And if I say the word semiconductor, how many people know what a semiconductor is or what that is? Okay, so a lot of people in this room, but I think that when we talk about opportunities and people not seeing themselves in positions. So I was able to travel to different countries like South Korea, Taiwan, the Netherlands. I lived there for 2 years through opportunities that I found here in Hillsborough. Okay. Is this better? Yeah. All right. I was right. Okay. Back to what I was saying. So the semiconductor industry is so big, and wait a little bit. I'm used to a lab here, Mike, so sorry. Yeah, but what I want to say is there aren't as many barriers as we say. I think it's a lot of misalignment. It's a lot of communication. It's a lot of industry insights and understanding. There are so many, so a lot of the positions that were mentioned there, technicians, those are only entry-level positions. So there's a ton of upward mobility. So when I think of all that was mentioned there, I just want to say, why not Portland? And I'm here to stay. So
Thank you. Thank you so much for that vote of confidence for Portland. Joe, same question, from your unique perspective. I think you can try this. From your unique perspective, given what you learned from Liza, we know your efforts, but specifically, what did that make you reflect on related to the work that you do?
Yeah, so for me, it reinforces the work that we've been doing for over 5 decades, and that is working with people to get them trained up and prepare for success in the workplace. So, but just to call out a few things, I think it starts with building highly effective training programs. And we've got a number of our workforce development staff here. So can you raise your hand? Give a shout out to this team. Let's give this team a hand. They work on the top lines every day. So it's building high quality training programs and based on best practice, tying to industry, and meeting people where they are and removing their barriers. So we want to be the best at that. And so one of the things that we are embarking on moving forward, we've started is we're going to get accredited. So we're going to accredit our workforce development programs. And that's going to take us to a whole nother level. So we'll have higher standards, we'll have competencies, and we'll have a national accreditation body driving our work. So that's number one. The other thing, I mentioned it earlier, is this what we call the general partner, limited partnership. Sometimes we use the term strategic partners. And so just like AWS or AWL, some of the Nikes, Providence, some of the other companies that we work with, it's important that we work together. And we spend lots of time together, get commitments. PGE is another one. And be very intentional about putting people on a track towards success. So that would be number 2. And I would say 3 is playing to our strengths. So we talked about, we heard from Liza, construction, semiconductor, healthcare, those type of jobs that have livable wage careers. We want to stay in those lanes. And semiconductor is going to be something new for us, but we have what I believe is a technology in terms of workforce training. And the team, I do a lot of talking, the team does all the work. And we have a formula that gets people to success. And later we have a second half of this workforce development day. We have the summit, and we'll be hearing from some of our trainees that have landed really good jobs and having success. And the last thing I would say is that I am excited. This is a moment in time when you think about it, Liza talked about there are jobs here. Now, most of those jobs are below livable wage jobs, but we also have a situation where we have folks who have skills, high skills, that are also leaving. And so they're leaving jobs. And so I think this is an opportunity to work with folks who have been shut out, folks that haven't had access to these career opportunities. We have a moment in time that we can make it happen. And so I'm extremely excited about that opportunity. And I've talked about, this forgotten human capital. And I think we can really tap into these folks that have lived experience, who bring a lot to the table, and they can really impact our overall community in a way that we all see in our future.
Thank you. Well, to riff off Joe's point about this opportunity, this is a group that often I think about when people say, "Oh, there's nobody in the pipeline." You're not really looking that hard in the pipeline. So, how do we get these 35,000 opportunity youth, who I believe primarily are made up of youth of color, rural, lower income youth? How do we get them finally the opportunities to actually, because people, I think, play a little sleight of hand with that group. And how do we get them ready, to be a part of the semiconductor manufacturing? And how do we make sure that there's access in that space for all?
Yeah, so within ASML, I had the privilege of developing a competence development program that is to upskill engineers to do work. Simple as that. With the new technology that encapsulates technical knowledge, that encapsulates working safely, that encapsulates working with a team, it encapsulates a lot. So the important piece for workforce development and thinking about youth in the future is industry alignment. So that actual entry point into a company. Not all semiconductor companies require college degrees. I have a college degree. If I would have known that, maybe I would have chosen a different path, maybe not. But the beauty is that because that I look at that as an opportunity. So as long as there's a lot of industry alignment, so the actual criteria that is,
So you're saying, when you say industry alignment, you're meaning making sure that the training programs that people have are connected to the specific needs of that industry, that they're not general. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. So that they're not, that they're not general, but that they're defined by the people who are actually hiring those roles. So a lot of people will get hired from the Navy or the military to do technical roles. Why? Because they work on ships, they work in aviation. It makes a lot of sense to actually work on machines. If you're going to be working with electrical equipment, if you're going to be working on highly technical problems and troubleshooting, that's, because that's so familiar to those people who are hiring for those roles, it's just really important that, those criteria are defined really clearly. But that doesn't limit to what they already know. So what's really important is also connecting community. So you have folks, I think Joe had mentioned, there's so many people who work at Intel who look like us. There's so many people who work at Microchip who look at us. Who's to say that they can't design programs for us? And that's essentially what I would love to share.
Yeah. And that, Joe, actually does go back to the certifications that you're getting, because it's that certification that makes sure that you're connected to that industry alignment. So I'm going to pop back to you for this question, and then Andrew, which is if you want to expand any on the activities and changes that you are undertaking to make sure that these opportunity youth get a variety of opportunities.
Yeah, and I'll say this too before I jump into that. I'm excited. We are working with Yosef and Project Lido, developing a 12-week curriculum using our formula, our technology, to build the semiconductor training. I can't. Well, it's they have conversations. Technically, I don't know what they're talking about, but you could imagine for what it's like for our students to have someone like a Yosef or Fidel, the head of a Project Lido, teaching the class or leading the effort versus some of the traditional types of instructors that we have. And so excited, very excited about that. We're going to launch, I believe in July 8th, I think is I'm still trying to find all the cheese, but I'm sure Andrew can help us out a little bit in terms of getting that piece done. And others. But what are we doing? The first thing I'll say, and you guys will see more to come, is that we're raising the bar at school in Rosemary Anderson High School. So we're getting rid of, we're going to rebrand Rosemary Anderson High School to Rosemary Anderson Prep. And we're going to be very intentional about what we mean when we say prep. So we're preparing young people for success. And we don't care if you come in reading at the first grade level or the 12th grade. It doesn't matter. But the expectations are going to be extremely high moving forward. They're already high, but we got to go to the next level. And that starts with us as leaders within the organization. It starts with educators. And I'm so proud of our educators in our school because they've been going through a 2-year professional development. So our instructors actually have coaches that they've been working with, and we've invested $1.2 million in professional development. So that's number one. We gotta pick it up so we can prepare our folks earlier. The second thing is expansion. So we're most of our workforce has been in Multnomah County historically, and now we're out in Washington County. So it's how do we branch out so we can have access to more of the folks that we like to serve, and also build relationships with companies and stakeholders in other jurisdictions. Third, more aggressive recruiting. Getting to young people is different than the way we used to get to young people. Young people used to just show up and then you could talk. Now it's a whole different way in which you have to recruit. And for us, the biggest thing will be partnership. So we can't do this work alone. We've got to partner with organizations on the ground, with people, and then let them know about the opportunities and be very clear about the expectations. And the last thing that I would say, in addition to youth, but young adults, getting back to this whole thing about safe communities. I believe it's a value. I believe that if we're going to move the dial, build a pipeline or pipelines for folks with options, we have to have safe communities. So when people feel unsafe, they're not interested in coming out to explore. And so our investment in professionalizing of community safety workers, I believe, is huge, because I think the safety is vital. And if we can access people that have very unique lived experience that are passionate about keeping people safe, I think that's going to go a long way to moving the dial. But we got to put our money where our mouth is. And so I'll be working with a lot of people to figure that out and make it happen. And we're on our way.
Joe, just a little aside to that, I don't know if you want to have a response, but the other thing about when I think about community safety is giving these opportunity youth and other young people a reason. When people don't have a reason, they do unreasonable things, right? And so the more that you can provide opportunities and reasons for them to live, to care, to build, you are helping make the community safe, right? In this other way. Right, I think so. Would you say?
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense to me. Mm-hmm. I mean, to me, if I were a policymaker, I would probably be looking at investing 20 to 30 million in this sort of strategy statewide, I think you would see the benefits in schools, in neighborhoods. I think we would all thrive. And then just think about it. Giving people who, you can't buy experiences from the streets. I'm not from the streets. I was on the outside looking in. But folks with unique life experience who have made a commitment to restorative justice, why wouldn't we embrace that and build a career for folks so that they can all help us stay safe and partner with the other systems around public safety? It just makes too much sense to me.
Thank you. Well, Andrew, you're going to bring us home with the questions before we open it up. And so if you out in the audience have questions, think about your questions. Don't just look at me now when I ask if there are questions. Like, have a question, okay? All right, I'm looking at a couple of you. I'll be like, what about you? What about you? So I'll ask. All right, so Andrew, are there any policy recommendations you would suggest helping Oregon best respond to these workforce challenges and these opportunities?
Sure. How much time do I have, Sherry?
You have 7 minutes.
So, Oregon, like most other places, their primary workforce development strategy is the public education enterprise. It's K through 20, right? So I don't think that we can adequately address our needs until that system changes significantly. And I'll give an example from this morning and tie it into the population decline. So I was in Washington County at a summit that was convened for childcare, because there's a crisis in finding childcare workers, right?
Which is related to population decline.
Which, yes. And right now, there are about 3,500 childcare workers short, and most of those are teachers. Right now, there's been a long-standing challenge about wages in the childcare industry, and if you raise wages, then the cost of childcare goes up even more. In theory, but Multnomah County did pass early learning for all or childcare for all. So, and they provided some wage standards in there. They're going to norm it to the public school schedule, the contracted schedule for public school teachers. So that, in theory, is going to raise the wage to a place where, in theory, again, it's going to help people support themselves and their families as child care professionals. So that's going to have a ripple effect right in Washington County, because if you live in Washington County and you're a child care provider, you're going to try and get a job in Multnomah County because you're going to earn more money. And you can be. So now we flash forward to this notion of population decline. And just from demographics, PPS's enrollment is going to decline by more than 15% over the next 5 years. That's a massive decline, right? So why don't we make public school age 3 and up and use that infrastructure that we already have in the public school system? And by the way, there's a lot of teachers there. If you have a 15% decline in enrollment, you're going to lose your job. Unless, of course, you figure out how to bring in more students. And one way to do that is childcare. So that's the kind, and look, I'm no expert in childcare. I have no idea what that would mean. And I see Lorenzo out there. And so, but that's the kind of thinking I think we need to figure some of this stuff out and respond to it. And I also would think if we were able to do that, and say as a community, if you go to Portland, Oregon, and you have young children, 3 and up, go to the public system. It's covered. Think about the economic impact of that. If I was, in Ohio, and I'm like, shoot, I can move to Oregon and get that, I'm moving to Oregon. Because A, you care about the kids, and B, your kids are part of that population. But we'd have to do it right. And that's part of the challenge, right? Is how do we help these bigger systems evolve more rapidly than they do, because they don't. So I think in the back of my mind, that's the kind of policy change we should be pursuing, is to those big systems. Locally, Joe and his vision for, accreditation, that is a game changer. And I'll give you another example of why that works. So we help to support a program called Quick Start. It's a program that takes 2 weeks. All you need is a high school diploma, 2 weeks of training, and you get an opportunity for an entry-level job at Intel. And about 80% of the folks that participate in that program are women or people of color. About 75% of them wind up getting offers to work. I mean, this program works, right? We have a waiting list of 500 for that program. Contrast that to a decline in enrollment in our regional community colleges of about 17%. So what that says to me is it's that people don't not want training. They want training that works for them. And competency-based, quick, short-term, with an opportunity for a job on the back end is a massive driver to get people engaged in skill development. So I think that, again, is another place where we could encourage policymakers to incent that kind of training and opportunity for people, because it works. But again, the ultimate challenge there is going to be, you're going to compete with the educational enterprise, because that's where they're going to have to get the money. And they're not like that. So anyway.
Well, what you're saying, Andrew, aligns with what Yusuf was saying, but from a different angle, which is alignment. So not only do the companies want alignment, right? The people want alignment. They want to be aligned in the money they spend on the training or the time they spend on the trade to something that's going to turn over a job. They don't want to have an undergraduate degree in the history of philosophy like me. I mean, it was a long, strange trip, but here I am. But, some people don't want to go on that road, right? Some people do, and you should. I'm not talking down about philosophy degree, but some people want alignment. They want an alignment from their time to a job to and everybody is different. And the other thing you both talked about was the opportunity for large scale investment. I mean, Andrew, I talk about childcare all the time. And, to me, childcare or lack thereof is our significant stumbling block, because, Liza, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the factors driving a decrease in birth rates is the cost of having children. Younger people are saying, I cannot afford all that. And I certainly can't afford 1 or 2 for 18 years. It's too expensive. And so if we could remove one of those cost barriers, childcare, or reduce it significantly, to your point, we could become a draw. We could bring our in-migration back. And then if, policy folks saw what you were doing and invested even more, that it's about stabilizing the community. Because if you're able to engage these 35,000 opportunity youth, you got people who are like, no, I'm no longer for the streets. I'm from the semiconductor. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going here. And I think these are the transformative things that are real opportunities. They're not like long time for now or fairy tales or different. They're like real concrete opportunities that I think we all need to advocate for. So that being said, remember I told you I was going to ask questions? See, any questions? Yes. See, look, right off the top, I got 2. Okay. Yes. Let me, can you hand that mic out?
Well, thank you very much to the panelists as well as to the moderator. My name is Stephanie Montgomery, and I'm a consultant. And my question is directed primarily to Liza, although I hope others will comment. I really appreciated the statistics that you provided us and the data. And my question is, would you please comment upon how gentrification has impacted population decline and some of the other topics that we've talked about, and or provide us with resources where we could look for those particular references?
Great question.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. we've seen for decades now a very clear movement of historic populations from North and Northeast Portland out to East County, across the river to Vancouver. And as populations move, connections are lost, quick access to jobs are lost, and it makes it that much easier for people to leave the region. Connections to schools aren't as strong and other community institutions.
How do you see that being reversed? Since we know the impact, how do you see that being reversed some way? And not to put you on the spot, but if there are references that you could resource.
I think that's a really interesting question. It's something I've thought about a lot, looking at investments in Albina and attempts to get communities, get population and people with historic roots to that neighborhood to return. And I don't know if I can answer this question. I don't know if trying to return to the past or building opportunity in new places or a combination of both is the answer. Probably a combination of both.
Thank you, Liza.
Thank you, Liza. And I think the thing is, we do have an opportunity here to do a little study with the growth of the Albina district. I don't think there's enough historical right to return projects happening. And I do believe our Albina restoration project is one of the largest ever in the United States to attempt a new version of reclamation. So there'll be data hopefully coming out of that as it grows, but I don't think we know yet.
My name is Patrick Shaw. Hello. There we go. My name is Patrick Shaw, and I'm the founder of a nonprofit organization called Forefathers. I am a transplant to the Pacific Northwest. I'm working in the medical industry. So, Liza, to the data that you provided, I guess my question, when you are sitting in any of those meetings, is anyone willing to face what I would consider the truth, kind of similar to what Joe mentioned earlier about the diversity within the population here? As a part of the displacement from gentrification, I would believe that you're seeing the departure of people of color, especially because of the fact that they don't have a sense of belonging. And so are we seeing more leaders willing to acknowledge that those people are really uncomfortable being in a place that is not welcoming based off of their ethnicity and culture?
Who knew data was going to be so exciting?
So I don't know if I'm the right person to answer this question. I would say that what I see is an acknowledgement, but not an understanding or a commitment to changing. There's kind of a broad, there's a gap, there's a persistent gap, there's a problem, but taking the next step to repair that gap or to change the structures that are limiting opportunity is a much harder challenge for people to meet. And I don't know that we're seeing people able or willing to take the steps to meet that challenge.
Liza, is the data even disaggregated on that level? Like as far as like how many Black or Hispanic or Asian people of this population or this age group are leaving? Does it go down that far?
So, yes, just thinking some of it is and some of it isn't. Usually to see that fine-grained without a big margin of error attached to it, you have to wait for the decennial census, and then you can see more specifically population that's leaving by race or ethnicity. A lot of the data that we look at in workforce is disaggregated. One of the things that we've looked at a lot recently is apprenticeship numbers that are disaggregated by race, and seeing that even though there are, a lot of people participating in apprenticeships who are people of color, staying in construction jobs, moving up through journey level is not happening, and trying to understand why that is. So I would say with some of the data, yes, and with some, no, but there's usually a lag.
Yeah, and I know Partners in Diversity did some surveys a couple of years ago on that. So there is some surveys they did on that. Other questions? I need at least, there we go. Meetings. One.
Lorenzo Poe. I'm also a consultant. I have a comment and a question. Let me start with the question. For years, we have known this phenomenon of having programs and people moving through the apprenticeship level only not to get hired. So it seems that a large part of what we need to be focusing on is the hiring process, because we may just have a hiring process. Have you, as a group, any of you given thoughts to that about how to make that work better? My comment is this, and then I'll listen for your answer. Communities are not linear beings. It is a circular phenomenon. So when we talk about safety, as you were saying, Joe, you're correct. We have to talk about it holistically, from the school to the apprenticeship to the neighborhood to what happens in law enforcement, if you're ever going to achieve all this and the safety of a community. So I'll take this.
I'll take a stab. To your question about the hiring process. So we started a quality jobs initiative. It's a national phenomenon. The Biden administration's been pushing it, and it really is trying to respond to, a lot of people get in, but a lot of people never move up. And when you look at those populations, it tends to be the same populations that we've seen forever. People of color, women, younger people. So this quality jobs initiative is really intended to think more broadly about what it means to offer quality employment beyond just wages. Wages obviously are an essential component to, making a quality job, but so is workplace environment, so is advancement opportunities, so is training opportunities, so are other benefits that might be associated with that employment. Increasingly, people are interested in, hybrid work environments and that kind of stuff. But underlying all of that, Lorenzo, is this question of diversity. And is diversity beyond just saying, yes, I want to have a more diverse workforce, but how does that look on the upstream throughout the organization? And how are people advancing in the organization, and what do they look like? Are they reflective of the demographics that you claim you want to support through your work? So really, a lot of the challenges on the data side is when you get to private sector employment, there's no requirement that you disaggregate data, and HR data particularly. There's no requirement to do that. So it's really about a company's philosophy and a company's willingness to share that data. And I think increasingly on the positive side is that younger workers particularly want to see that. They want to know what their company's philosophy is related to justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. They want to understand it, they want to see it, and they want to be able to acknowledge it. So, I think that there's some good change that's developed over time, but this Quality Jobs Initiative, we had about 40 employers have signed on. We're trying to align it with B corporate status, which again is a status that corporations pursue that really sort of outline and hold them to a set of standards that not only are they about making money, but they're about doing good for the community and their workers. So we think that there are things that we can latch onto. Portland particularly has about 140 B Corp organizations that actively engage. And so we're hoping that we can embed some of these quality standards into that, and that kind of disaggregated and diversity information will be part of that.
Thanks. Anybody else on that one?
Yeah, I'd like, Charles, can you talk about our experiences in terms of placement and matriculation for our folks in pre-apprenticeship going into the trades? How is that in terms of Lorenzo's question? Are folk getting hired? Are they staying? Are they what does it look like for us?
We have good relationships and we have stale relationships. It's kind of delicate, but it's about building relationships and cultivating with people who are like-minded. So there's been like this weird passing of the guard, kind of, especially after COVID. There's like this huge migration on every level, whether it's entry or senior staff members. So it's kind of establishing what a new norm is, but we've done pretty good partnering and getting our folks in, but it's a consistency that you have to have. You have to have like a vigor about, how hard you're going to go at getting these types of opportunities. But we do have a lot of really good, solid relationships with major apprenticeship partners across the city and across the state. So we're doing what we can.
Go ahead. Yes, sir.
I also would want to say that I think employers just have to do better. Like they have to actually engage. I think it's very simple. Like there's tons of organizations that support community, and I think they have to engage with that. That's community engagement. If you're a recruiter in sourcing, you should have established friendships, relationships with those people, really close relationships. So that's, I think, just try harder as the private sector.
And I have one more thing to add. One of the programs that we've worked with is Green Dot, which attempts to address culture in construction job sites. And a lot of the jobs that, we're excited about, we're promoting are jobs that happen on location, that happen with one or two other coworkers. And there are, a lot of people get placed in jobs and they don't stay because there is at best, not welcoming and at worst, hostile or unsafe environment. We hear that from women who are, trying to become linesmen. We hear it from construction workers. And so that culture piece and employers being more aware and responsible for the culture that's happening on their job site is a huge part of it.
Good afternoon, Loretta Smith with Dream Big Communications. And Andrew, could you speak to the report that you did for IBR and for Espousal around harassment in the workplace, about having wraparound supports, transportation, housing, those kinds of things?
Yeah. So thank you, Loretta. So we recently, and Liza was very deeply involved in that report. I think that's really where Green Dot came up. Did a study on the proposed interstate bridge replacement. And so, like, how many jobs are going to be available? What are the apprenticeship utilization standards? All that kind of stuff. And, that again, that's one of those massive opportunities. But we have to have qualified people to take advantage of that. So the recommendations in that report really are about, it's one, again, and I'll give, Joanne Hardesty looked me in the eye when she first got elected, and she was like, you guys do a great job of getting people into apprenticeship, but they just, fall off. And it's true. It still happens that people, and particularly people of color and women, are not advancing as much as they should in the trades. I mean, even if you did just a sort of linear analysis, Lorenzo, it's like something's wrong. And it's a cultural problem, and it's an employer problem who won't hold their workers accountable. And so part of the recommendations in the report is to really make sure that there's supervisory people on those sites that look like the people that are working on the sites, that there are wraparound supports, and there are avenues for people who experience harassment or experience, problems on the job, that there are specific avenues to address those kinds of challenges that are unique to underserved populations in those jobs. So that's sort of new, because a lot of these workers on these jobs and the contracts related to those workers are very specific about how problems arise and how problems are dealt with. And again, it's a structural problem that we need to work together to offer up alternatives to those existing sort of protocols, because otherwise they won't change and the numbers don't change. And it's just, if you look at participation numbers over time, they have not moved that much broadly within the industry. I will say we have seen improvements in diversity numbers within organized labor. I do think that there's been a bit of a change in organized labor, recognizing that, especially in the construction trades, I don't know broadly, but I think in the construction trades, that their future workforce doesn't necessarily look like them. And they need to figure out how to get those members engaged, involved, and in advancing in the trades. So fingers crossed, and we'll see what happens with those recommendations.
So we're close to the end, and you all did not disappoint with your question asking. And I'm going to take a point of order for myself. So I'm reading a book about this, about race in the workplace. And I can tell you some things. First of all the research across all industries, the sentence that comes up over and over is that race remains a determinant factor. And what that means is that no matter what you do, race remains a determinant factor. So if that's the case, then we do need to focus on the impact of race once you're recruited, once you're on the job. One could probably also say gender remains a determinant factor, right? So that might be opportunities, additional financial opportunities for your work, Joe, and your work, Andrew, which is to expand, to come to Loretta's point, to wrap around. And in this wraparound, it means working with the companies separate from the onboarding or hiring on helping them see what they may be missing about how race remains a determinant factor on their work sites. The other thing, that in my upcoming book, February 2025, that you can buy, is that there are a system of what I call competency checking, where people of color and women are being held to higher standards in the workplace. So there's less room for error. So that has to be addressed, right? And then, quite frankly, I at this point analogize it to medication, to someone getting a transplant. If you have a transplant, you have to be on medication your whole life. It's because the body is going to try to reject the organ. Race and racism in our society is a bit like a transplant. The body that is systemic racism continuously tries to reject, in my opinion, people of color, women from certain places. So that means we need continuous medication. And that medication looks like EEOC, looks like diversity, equity, inclusion. It looks like so we have to think about the fact that we have to continue to administer the medication to keep the systemic body from rejecting what it perceives as a foreign entity, which is women and people of color in spaces where they haven't been. And when we think we don't need to, when we drop that piece, the other piece doesn't work. Like, we have to have both pieces equally engaged to go beyond the hiring, right? Because the hiring, and also the New York Times just put out a really excellent report on initial hiring. They sent out 80,000 resumes around the country, and they changed the names. And you can see that online. Some of the names are Black, some are white, and you go ahead and see what happened. And you also see the companies that did well, what they did differently. So that's a New York Times article. You can take a look at that. But that's my 2 cents. So thank you all so much. And the summit is next. Do you want to say a little bit about that?
Yeah, so let's give it up for our panel and Sherry Dunn. To thank all of you for being here. I hope that you got something, a nugget or two out of this in terms of moving the mission forward. I certainly learned and took some notes here. And so, yeah, so this part of the event is done. We also, I know some of you will probably stay and some of you will probably go, but we have our annual Work Connections event that's going to be happening out in the foyer, where we're going to highlight some of our work trainees and our partners. And you're welcome to stay or not. But I'm so glad that you are here. One thing I would ask is that you all look into the camera at some point before you leave. Look into the camera and talk to the camera and commit to 3 things that you can do and will do to help us build this robust pipeline and give people an opportunity, the people that we're talking about, the folks that we focus on, an opportunity to be successful. So if you could do that for me, just 3 things. All right? Just 3. You can think about it. Thank you so much for being here.